Hello and welcome back to Full Circle with Shawn. I'm your host, Shawn, and today we're talking about perfectionism. And what is perfectionism? Let's start there, right? So perfectionism is trying to make every aspect of a product or your service meet a crazy standard. And that standard is often unobtainable or impractical. Now, in startups, this happens all the time. Okay, it's the obsession, the founders or the employees with getting every detail right before you launch the product, and this leads to repeated delays and even missed opportunities. Sometimes it's driven by fear. So the founders and the employees pursue perfection as a way to mitigate the risk of failure, and they believe the product is less likely to fail if they can reach perfection. And what happens is it can actually impact innovation. It will actually discourage people from risk taking or experimenting with more novel ideas. It also can have a massive effect on your team dynamics or the team morale. Perfectionism can create a lot of stress. It can increase, say, your burnout rates, and it can lead to a lot of frustration among team members because they're trying to meet these unrealistic standards and they'll never be met. And then it can also have a lot of economic consequences. So perfectionism can lead to excessive spending. Either it could be money and it could be time. And basically it can affect the startup's runway and the potential for financial stability. And you might say to me, yeah, Shawn, that seems pretty straightforward. So why do most founders and team members of startups or early commercial companies have this mindset? And it comes to a few reasons, really. It comes to fear of market rejection. So founders believe that only a flawless product can succeed against their competition. And they fear that any imperfections can lead to immediate rejection by users or even investors. And then secondly, it's personal passion and vision, right? So many founders are really passionate about their products, and they see that it's a personal extension of themselves, and it has to have certain capability, and it has to meet their dreams. And this can drive the desire to achieve perfection. And then you have all the hype, right? So success stories of startups where they highlight their real massive attention to detail and creating a perception that perfection is common, and it's not. Then you have lack of experience. So first-time founders especially, or those without substantial startup experience, may think that perfection equals success, and they don't realize the trade-offs between speed, quality, and iteration. You also have investor expectations. So pressure from investors who really demand high quality outputs can fuel a perfectionist approach. And then cultural factors. So in some cultures, there's a very strong emphasis on not failing or making mistakes publicly. And this can really drive founders and team members to avoid any form of embarrassment or criticism. So what are the pitfalls in perfectionism? So you have delay in launch, as we talked a little bit before. You have constant revisions and refinement of different products, and they're really seeking to improve the minor details, and this can delay the launch, and it can delay it indefinitely. We have fear of imperfection, so the fear that the product is not yet perfect or could be further improved, and it creates hesitation to be released. And then we have a very popular one, waiting for the perfect moment. And this is where founders might delay the launch, waiting for the perfect time, the ideal market conditions, or more features or better technology that just might never arrive or not even be necessary for a first launch. And then you have analysis paralysis, right? So that's where you overanalyze your feedback from beta testers or pilot users, and then you make decisions to stall going live, and the team struggle to address every single piece of feedback or criticism. You might also have resource misallocation. So resources such as time, talent, and money are poured into making the product perfect, which could be better spent on marketing or customer acquisition or plenty of other areas. And finally, you have loss of competitive advantage. And this is where you're striving for perfection, but you actually miss the opportunity to be first on market. You allow your competitors to capture significant market share, even though they have less polished offerings. So let's go ahead and look at some real life examples. We'll start with Color. So Color was a social photo sharing application, and it got about 41 million in funding before launch, and it was delayed trying to perfect the technology and the user experience, so based on feedback. And when it finally launched, it was met with very high confusion. It was very complex. It failed to gain any traction, and it shut down. If we look at Clinkle, Clinkle was a payment app, and it raised a lot of money, and it had ambitious promises about revolutionizing mobile payments. And what happened was they kept perfecting it. They kept adding features to it and upgrading their interface, and it led to multiple delays in launch. And by the time Clinkle decided to launch, the market had seen significant advancements from competitors like Square, and it led to its failure to launch. If we look at Essential Products, so Essential Products was launched by Andy Rubin. And if you don't know Andy Rubin, he's the co-founder of Android. And it was aimed to create a high-end smartphone. And despite the reputation of Andy and the significant investment, the company struggled with delays and perfection in design and perfection in functionality. And the first phone, when it was finally released, it got mixed reviews and the company closed. Let's just look at Lily Robotics. So the Lily Robotics was developing an autonomous drone, which was a customer sensation. It went huge, right? Everybody wanted some. It collected huge pre-orders based on their promotional videos. However, their product did not match the promotional hype. So they delayed, and they kept building, and eventually they failed to deliver. They ended up going bankrupt, and they never shipped a single commercial product to its list of waiting customers. And there are plenty of examples that we could find if we wanted to of the same thing. So let's look at some of the impacts of perfectionism. And the first would be resource drain. So it's time, it's capital, right? It's increased development costs. Perfectionism often leads to constant iterations and enhancements, as we've talked about, but those don't only extend development time, but they also increase the cost associated with labor, with materials, and with resources. Then you have the opportunity cost. So time spent on perfecting a product could have been used for other crucial activities, as we talked about, market research, customer acquisition, exploring additional product lines. We have burnout of team members. So continuous cycles and revisions and high demands for perfection can lead to team exhaustion and team burnout. And this decreases the productivity and can increase turnover. Well, now you have to pay for recruitment, you have to pay for training costs, and you might have skills gaps, or you might have gaps in knowledge of where your product is. Another impact of perfectionism is marketing and launch delays. And I think we've talked about this a lot now. So product launches are delayed in the pursuit of perfection, and then marketing campaigns may also need to be put on hold or even extended. And this can lead to increased marketing cost, or you lose momentum. Then you have, your capital's tied up in unsold inventory. So if you have physical products, striving for perfection might result in large quantities of inventory being produced to meet the anticipated demand, but it's tied up because you haven't sold anything. Or better yet, you haven't released anything, right? You might have orders, but you haven't released anything. And then you have, your increased risk of your funding drying up. So startups are normally relying on investor funding. And if you're a perfectionist, then that can lead into delayed product launches and missed milestones, and investors can become reluctant to provide further funding. And this is why a lot of investors like the build, measure, learn method in the lean startup approach. And so what is the lean startup approach? Well, it's actually a phrase that was coined by Eric Ries in his book, The Lean Startup, and I do highly recommend reading it. But the core principles behind the approach is to basically minimize the waste of resources while maximizing the efforts toward creating products or meeting the customer needs as efficiently as possible. And it is a methodology. So it starts with rapid prototyping and testing. So lean startup emphasizes creating an MVP, a minimum viable product, and getting it into the hands of the users very quickly. And that's quite different from, as we're talking about with the perfectionists, where they often delay product launches until a more polished version is achieved. They also look at feedback over assumptions. So a lean startup will prioritize learning from real customer feedback over assumptions of what they think a perfect product is. If we look at iterative development in the lean approach, the focus is on iterative cycles. So you build, then you measure user engagement and outcomes, and then you learn from these measurements to make informed updates. And that makes it a lot more dynamic and adaptable than the often static and unyielding pursuit of perfection. Then you have validated learning, and that's where each iteration in the lean startup is designed to validate or invalidate hypotheses around the product and the market, and that reduces the risk of building products that no one wants. And then we have cost efficiency, right? So obviously the lean methodology helps conserve resources because it focuses efforts on essential features and improvement based on user feedback rather than spending excessively on any unproven ideas. And then the last point is faster time to market, right? So the lean startup approach is to avoid the trap of over-engineering and reach the market faster, and then adapt based on actual customer needs and behaviors. So let's touch on a few misconceptions. So the first being perfect products win markets. And the reality is market fit and timing often matter more than a flawless product. And the second misconception, perfection equals professionalism. And in reality, flexibility and adaptability can be more beneficial to a startup's growth and are often seen as more professional. And the last one is customers expect perfection. And in reality, early adopters and most customers value innovation and problem solving over perfection. Now let's look at a little further into customer insights, so customer feedback. So building with the customer. So that's the importance of launching early versions to gain feedback. And then we have early validation and product market fit. And launching early allows startups to test whether their product actually meets the needs and demands that the market's asking for. And it enables quicker adjustments based on real world usage rather than their assumptions. You also have iterative improvement. So early user feedback provides invaluable insights that can guide further development. You can focus on features and improvements that truly matter to your users. Then you get to build a loyal user base, right? So early adopters often become loyal customers and brand advocates. So engaging with them from the early stages can help build a company around the product, which can be crucial for long-term success. You also get to reduce your waste because when you identify what users do and don't like about your product early on, you can avoid spending time and resources on unwanted features. You can streamline development of impactful areas. Looking at customer insights, it also can lead to a culture of responsiveness within your company. So by starting with an MVP and evolving based on user feedback, it helps to really establish your company culture in a value of responsiveness and agility, which are essential traits for adapting to changing market conditions. And then we have competitive advantage, right, which we talked about earlier. So speed to market can provide a competitive edge. Launching early and iterating quickly can help startups outpace competitors. And then finally, risk mitigation. So early launches help in de-risking the product development process. And then by gathering early feedback and making necessary pivots, startups can really avoid the high costs and risks associated with launching a fully developed product. So what can we look at where customer insights have actually shaped a product's evolution effectively? If we look at Dropbox, so everybody knows Dropbox, and Dropbox in the early days struggled with user adoption. But by implementing a feedback loop early in its development, they identified that users were confused about how the product worked. And to be honest, I was one of those people. But what they did is they responded by creating a simple video demonstrating its use. And that led to a significant increase in user signups and helped define future marketing and their strategies. If we look at Instagram, and everybody knows Instagram, so it originally launched as BURBN. It was a check-in app, and that included gaming and photo sharing features. The founders realized through user feedback that the photo sharing aspect was the most popular, so they stripped away all the other features and relaunched as Instagram. And it obviously became one of the fastest growing social media platforms. If we look at Slack, so which is now a quite popular communication platform. It started as a internal tool for a gaming company called Tiny Speck. And the feedback from the development team highlighted its potential as a standalone product. So they made the pivot based on those insights, and look at what they are now. If we look at Zara, and Zara is obviously known for its fashion. So Zara's strategy is really dependent on customer feedback, and store managers are actually tasked with reporting customer reactions and demand for new styles back to their headquarters. And then they make design decisions based on this feedback, allowing Zara to constantly offer designs that meet the current customer desires. And there are many, many more examples. So let's look at feedback loops, right? We just talked about some of these feedback loops. So what are they? So a feedback loop starts with direct insight into user needs. You ask your users what works, what doesn't work, what features they desire, and then you can better tailor the products to more reflect what the market demands. Quicker identification of issues, right? So regularly asking and analyzing your clients in feedback helps identify and resolve issues very quickly. It prevents small problems from becoming big problems, and it enhances the overall satisfaction of your users. You can also use it to enhance user experience. It can lead to your products being more intuitive, more accessible, and more enjoyable to use. And don't forget that as you engage with your customers for their opinions and you showcase that you value their feedback, you are fostering deeper connections and increasing customer loyalty. You're increasing customer retention. And let's look at two more things that these insights can do for you. So feedback loops make development more agile. Companies can pivot or make iteration changes in response to new information, and they can stay dynamic and they can stay competitive in the rapidly changing markets, because at the end of the day, you might disrupt, but you don't want to be disrupted, right? And then finally, you get evidence-based decision making. So decisions that are informed by client feedback are more likely to be effective, and they're more likely to be supported by actual user data, reducing your risk associated with new initiatives. So let's look at some strategies to overcome perfectionism. Right. So the first thing we want to do is we want to set realistic goals. We need to define achievable milestones. We need to take guidance and direction. So clear, achievable milestones provides a roadmap for the team, helping everyone keep aligned, and they get to focus on the immediate and the long-term objectives. We want to measure our progress. Right. So again, realistic milestones allow for the measurement of progress in very concrete terms. And these offer opportunities to celebrate success and reevaluate our approaches when our goals are not met. We want to look at resource management. And again, by setting achievable goals, startups can more efficiently allocate resources. They can ensure that the time, money, and effort are spent on priorities that are made to drive the growth and the development. We want to look at morale and motivation. So achievable milestones, again, right, can boost team morale and team motivation. If we look at risk mitigation, so realistic goals help in managing expectations and mitigate risk by avoiding the pitfalls of overextension. They can help with things like burnout or financial strain from those that are instead trying to pursue overly ambitious goals. Next thing we want to do is we want to prioritize. So we want to focus on core functionalities that directly address primary customer needs and pain points, right? It's always a thing. You need to find the pain that your customer is dealing with, and that's what you need to fix. And how do we do this? We do it by efficient resource use. So we concentrate on core functionalities that ensure that, again, resources such as time, money, and personnel are allocated efficiently. We want to increase user satisfaction. So we address the most pressing customer needs, and we resolve the most significant pain points, as I've already said. We want to go faster time to market. We want to focus on essential features that can accelerate the development process. We want to improve product quality. So we want to prioritize things that maintain a high quality of the most critical features, and that way we are ensured that they're well developed and they're thoroughly tested. And it actually avoids any dilution of quality that it can occur when too many features are developed at the same time. Prioritization will also enhance competitive edge. We'll be developing a product that effectively solves key problems much better than competitors. We want to make sure that we look at scalability and expansion. So if we establish a strong foundation with core functionalities, we make it easier to scale the product, and we make it easier to add additional features later. And then we want to have a clear marketing message. So if we prioritize when a product is focused on its core functionalities, it's easier to communicate its benefits and the unique selling propositions to your potential customers. And then the last strategy we're going to look at today is embracing the concept of MVP, so minimal viable products, and what benefits they have. So rapid market entry, right? MVPs allow startups to enter the market quickly with a basic version of the product. And that basic version should be sufficient to attract early adopters and gather those valuable feedback that I keep talking about. It's going to be cost efficient. So developing an MVP requires a lot less capital and resources than a fully featured product. We're going to use it for learning and adaptation. So we're going to test the market with an MVP, and then we can learn how customers use and how they react to the product. And we take those insights for further development and further refinement. We're going to use our MVP for validating our product concept, right? So MVPs can validate the underlying business idea before significant resources are invested, because we need to ensure there's a demand for the product and that it addresses a genuine need. And while there's a lot more benefits of an MVP, let's just say that, your flexibility to pivot is a very important one. If it doesn't perform as expected, if the market doesn't take it, then the startup can pivot. They can pivot more easier than having a full featured product or being completely overinvested. So I want to leave you with some valuable resources, some books. So The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, and I've already talked about this one. It does talk a lot about the fundamental principles of lean startups, MVPs, and iterative product development. You have The Startup Owner's Manual by Steve Blank, and this provides a step-by-step guide for building a successful startup. And then you have Hooked, right? How to Build Habit-Forming Products by Nir Eyal. And this really explores how to build products that create user habits, integrating user feedback into the product development cycle. And then there's plenty of online courses like, Coursea's Lean Startup, right? And General Assembly, which is workshops and short courses on lean startup methodologies. You have websites and blogs, so Lean Startup Co. blog and Both Sides of the Table, right? And the MVP resource. And then there's other podcasts. So there's Startup by Gimlet, Masters of Scale, How I Built This. And finally, there's community and network groups, right? So there's always meetups and startup meetups. There's the Founder Institute, and there's plenty of resources there. And then again, back to your old friend Google. So there are plenty of things that you can do to increase your. Now on the next episode, we will be chatting about active listening. And I know I've touched on active listening before, but let's really deep dive into it in our next chat. So thanks for joining me on Full Circle with Shawn. I look forward to chatting next time.
End of the road. We've come so far in the circle of life. With Shawn, we're stars. From the depths of care to the force we go. In the twists of life, we reap and sow. Journey on through every phase. Find your strength in the darkest of days.